Yeah, let's do this. I'll start off and introduce myself. Everybody, welcome to our webinar today. Charles and I will be sharing some of our best practices and what we have as far as 360 consulting offerings. I am Skylar Jong. I have been with DecisionWise for nearly 2 years, and I've been doing professional services and coaching and consulting for nearly 7 years. So I have background in law as well as an MBA, and I love working with executives and leaders and helping them find best ways that they can leverage feedback about themselves, but also we do a lot of engagement surveys too, where we help clients with that. So I'm one of our consultants, and I'll let Charles tell a little bit about himself.
Yeah, thanks, Skylar. So Charles Rogel, I work as the Vice President of Consulting here at DecisionWise. I've been here a long time. It's been 19 years now. We've been in business 26 years, and done a lot of coaching with a lot of different leaders, helped a lot of clients set up 360 programs, trained other HR professionals on how to do coaching as well. So we're going to try to cram a bunch of information into this 30-minute presentation to show you kind of how to set this up and run this either internally or leverage some of our services and coaches here at DecisionWise.
Perfect. And as Charles kind of mentioned, as some of you have joined, we do have a Q&A feature, so feel free to enter into the chat any questions you've got, and we'll try to make sure we address those throughout this, whether during or at the end of our presentation today. But with that, I want to jump in and start sharing what we'll cover. So really today we're going to talk about the consulting services we offer at DecisionWise relevant to 360 assessments. And really there's three major buckets of services we offer. The first is design. We're going to help, we help build and design 360 assessments. The next is we help in helping your participants get prepared. We do some orientation offerings there. And then ultimately, when you have your participants get their report, we help with them with next steps as far as debriefing them and doing some coaching. And we'll talk about our offerings there. But I want to jump in first and talk about choosing the right 360 assessment. And I'm very purposeful in saying, not about designing the right 360 assessment, because we actually have 3 off-the-shelf foundational 360 assessments we utilize: our executive leader, our business leader, and an individual contributor foundational assessments. And realistically, a lot of organizations, if they're dipping their toe into 360 assessments, these are some really good options to start with. And a lot of our clients actually leverage these for years and years because they cover the general basis of what it means to be a good leader at these different levels. And, our executive leader focuses more on strategic leadership, business leader more about people leadership, being a manager, and then individual contributor about getting results and making sure you've got the tools and resources to progress and invest in yourself. So I'd say a major benefit of these foundational assessments is we have benchmarking available. So of the thousands of leaders that have taken each of these assessments, we've got millions of data points of feedback to say, here's where the average executive leader is scoring when they take this assessment, and average business leader. And that will show up in an individual's report. When they see that, they'll say, oh, how did I score? Well, they get a little bit of a comparison when they see our benchmarks. And in our coaching sessions, we'll talk about, we give some perspective on how to interpret that benchmark and how to leverage it. So any other thoughts on our foundational assessments, Charles?
Yeah, I was going to add it. The common scenario is that we have a company that comes to us and they say, hey, we want to have our executives go through a 360 process. And the executive leader version is typically the one we go with. Since it's a group of maybe 7 to 10 leaders, it doesn't make a lot of sense to customize, especially if you don't have a leadership competency model in place. So it's just kind of quick and easy. It does provide some real comprehensive feedback. And yeah, many people use them, again, like you said, when there's smaller groups, or if you're doing them, here or there, across the organization.
Yeah, for sure. On the flip side, if you are going to implement a 360 program and inculcate it into your culture, then you really should consider, let's design our own specific assessment, and we can definitely help on that. In fact, we highly recommend you leveraging us in some sort of fashion. We'll talk about the 3 major ways we help. But when you're designing a custom assessment, it's actually relatively easy. We have a library of 80 competencies already set up, and each competency has four foundational items that, so in total, there's 320 questions that we have available in this library. And so we can work with you on taking your leadership competency model and mapping it and saying which of these 80 competencies maps closest to what you're doing. And we're talking 360 today. And in some ways, I still need to adopt this language. We should be utilizing the term of multi-rater assessment, because these assessments can be leveraged for all sorts of reasons. 360 assessment is kind of the term that's most recognized, but multi-rater assessments can be really about performance. You can be doing performance reviews on our platform, and we can help design those as well. But you can do all sorts of different tailored assessments that we can work with you on building. And our platform really runs all sorts, where you can focus on all levels of leadership, but also struggling employees, that employee that's on a performance improvement plan. Like, put them through a 360 assessment to show them where they need to make some improvements and get some of that feedback from other people. But really, again, you can focus on lots of different areas. With that, these are the 3 major offerings we have when it comes to consulting design services. We have our entry-level 360 assessment design. And I say entry-level because this is the lightest touch of help that we give. And usually clients will come to us and they say, oh, I love your foundational assessment. We're trying to do some executive assessments with our executive team. We want to use your foundational executive assessment, but there's 1 or 2 competencies that don't really fit for what we're going after. What ones would you recommend? And we'll kind of insert and tailor and kind of edit. So this becomes a highly editing process, where we'll take some of our foundational assessments and edit them and make them applicable to you. Not necessarily starting from scratch, but starting from a page that's already proven with our competencies. The next level is where we would take a blank page assessment, and we haven't created anything, and we will take what leadership competence you have, like any competency model. If you've got leadership pillars or principles that you run by, we'll take those, and a lot of organizations will have, these are our 4 pillars. These are our 6 competencies that we'd love our leaders to have. And we'll map that with our competency library and start to refine and identify the right questions to ask for your leaders. That's one of the huge benefits of making your own assessment. Is it's kind of a backdoor positive, is you can reinforce your leadership competency model by creating your own assessment. So people go, oh, we're not only talking about how this leadership capability is important in town hall meetings, but we're also seeing that it's backed up by our assessment, and we're being graded on it in our assessment of how we're doing. And it really, like I said, reinforces what you've already designed there.
Sometimes we'll take your competency model, and you might have some some unique descriptions or behaviors that you're trying to promote that we don't have in our 80 different competency list. And so we'll just use or modify maybe the language you have already in your competency behaviors to lend themselves as a question on a 360 survey. So we've done a lot of that. That's where you get a customized question. And then same deal, you might have different levels for executives and other leaders and individual contributors. So you want to have those 3 different versions. And typically, once you've done this, you're using these assessments over time, because if you do it the next year, then you can do some trending comparisons to how they did the first time, second time, and so on. So you're trying to kind of bake that in, like Skylar mentioned, as these are the behaviors we want leaders to strive for that help shape our culture and what we're trying to do as an organization.
Yeah, you made me think of one other thing. If you're leveraging some of these designed assessments over and over, year after year, as long as you've got a certain threshold of people who've participated, you can also create your own internal benchmark. So again, as people are looking at the reports, they can say, well, how am I doing? You can say, well, according to other leaders at our organization, this is where they're showing up on average. and get some of those. And again, that takes, you're going to have to put in a few different people and have them run through a pilot scenario where we start to build that benchmark and we get a certain amount, but that can be really powerful for leaders going forward as well. The last service that we offer relevant to design is pretty in-depth, and this is a lot of work, and it's usually for clients who are younger organizations or ones going through a lot of change, maybe a merger, acquisition, and they don't have a refined leadership competency model. And we actually come in, we usually do an on-site where we'll do some focus groups with your leaders. We'll meet with various different people at various levels and say, what's important to your organization? And what's aspirational leadership topics we can also point to, and we build out a leadership model with you, and hopefully one that stands for the test of time and will last for years and years to come. And then we additionally, this is a bigger ticket item, so we're investing a lot of time and effort into it. We'll build out 360 assessments for you, generally at these different levels, but really we'll find whatever works best for you. But generally one around senior executive leaders, one around people leaders, and one around individual contributors or team leads. We don't do these all too often, but we love doing them because we get to know the organization and dig in deep with them. And I'd say leverage Charles and I for these or other consultants we've got. It's actually very valuable for the organization. Anything you'd add on that?
Yeah, this again, we can develop. Typically, we'll say, well, what's your mission? What are your values? Let's develop a competency model around those topics and the unique behaviors are trying to promote for leaders.
Perfect. I know we've talked a little bit about how we've already got a library of 80 competencies. We call it the DW80. I did want to just share what that library looks like as you're coming into the platform. So this is our Spective platform for those of you who haven't seen it. And I'll show a couple features, but under managed content, where we do a lot of the custom building, where we build a custom assessment or work with competencies or even build some recommendations. Under competencies, you can come here to the DecisionWise competency library. You can see, as we mentioned, there's 80 competencies total, 320 items or questions. And as I click into that, you're able to see we've got a whole list. I mean, 80 long, but we can map these and say, well, is caring important to your organization? Is collaboration, cross-cultural capabilities, and go really into depth. And so we work, as mentioned, these aren't just necessarily 360 assessments. Something we've started to do with a lot of organizations is building diversity, equity, and inclusion assessments, where we'll put executive teams through a benchmark to see how are you doing at making sure people are included and you're treating people equitably and you have a diverse population, and we can design assessments to help reinforce those principles as well. But this library is very robust, and I just kind of wanted to showcase it for a moment because it's pretty awesome that we've got the resources there. Okay, with that, I want to shift gears. So that's survey design, but the next stage of things that we really offer is we want your participants and people involved in the 360 process to feel comfortable. And so we offer a 30 to 60 minute virtual group session where it's a pre-orientation, where before you go through a 360 assessment, your participants can sit down and we'll walk through what are the best practices, what are the benefits. We'll address some frequently asked questions. And ultimately, we're trying to reduce anxiety of those participants, right? I think anybody can relate with if you're being told, oh, you're going to go through an assessment and everybody who works closely with you is going to tell you how you're doing. That, spines on your back go up and you go, oh, okay, that doesn't sound like it'll be a problem. And this pre-orientation meeting really helps paint out exactly what the process looks like, lays it out simply so people know what to expect, and we answer some of their questions and talk best practices. And this can be a hugely valuable, time. And a lot of times we try to build in some time where we have some Q&A at the end as well, so people can ask their own questions. But during this, I'll kind of preview some of things we cover in it in some following slides. But one, we first address some of the key questions that participants are going to have. These are what we call the 5 common questions, where people are really wondering what's going to happen there with their results, who's going to see the report, what are the expectations coming out of this. And from a consultant perspective, this is where we tailor the presentation to your organization, right? We're going to work with your HR professionals to say, well, what are the expectations? Let's talk about this frankly. And our best practices, let's address this up front with your participants so that there's no guesswork and they don't have a fast one pulled on them at the end where they go, oh, yeah, this is going to be in your file, or yeah, you're going to share this with your supervisor and they didn't know. So yeah. Any other thoughts on this, Charles?
No, I think that's great. And again, if you haven't done a 360 before, or a lot of people who haven't in your organization, this is really critical to help them prepare.
Perfect. Other things that we cover in that is we talk to them again. Here's what to expect. Here's what rater groups are. We go through definitions. We talk about the ideal people to participate. We have slides talking about how many people ideally to have, the minimum, and then the best practice of an amount. Again, we tailor that by organization depending on if we're surveying people who are individual contributors. They may not have direct reports, and so we'll address some issues like that in questions. And then we talk process and timeline as well, where we'll walk through and say, here's the expected timeline. And because sometimes people say, oh, we're going to get this, and they'll think it's going to happen over 1 week. And generally speaking, the whole process takes 3 to 6 weeks, depending on if there's rater selection and the time that goes into it, assessment administration. If they're doing one-on-one debrief, sometimes that takes a little bit of time to get that scheduled and align calendars. But during this orientation meeting, we give the expectation and say, your organization is doing rater selection and rater approval stages. They've opted for this process. This is how long we expect it to take, and walk them through that from the participant perspective. So then the last major thing we cover in those participant orientation meetings is, here's how to read your report. And this is a very detailed slide where we say you're going to have things on your report that look like this. Here's how to interpret it, right? You can see the benchmark, you can see the gaps, you can see how many people participated and where they rated based off of this, and the scale key. And we'll go into some of this detail in pre-orientation webinars with the participants. However, we also know that we're doing this webinar 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks before they're actually going to get their report, which kind of puts an exclamation point and leads to the next topic, is the importance of having a debrief. They'll have a resource like this, and we recommend other resources that they can turn to interpret their report. But actually having a one-on-one 360 debrief is the best practice. And we have other options as well. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how invaluable having a debrief is. But first off, let's talk about the 3 major options for 360 debriefing. We also have some extended coaching we'll talk about here too. But as I mentioned, the ideal scenario is having a one-on-one debrief. So a participant goes through, an executive leader, or an HR leader, or a business leader. They get their report, and then they'll sit down for 90 minutes with one of our coaches here at DecisionWise, and we walk them through their report. We coach them through that report, really, where we find out where they're at, how they're interpreting things, and then we kind of share some perspectives that will get them to where they need to be. And one of the major benefits of these sessions is they're generally confidential. So we are able to be a safe space for individuals to vent and say, I was really frustrated by this, or I was really surprised or taken aback by these results. And then as we coach them, we're able to get them to a better space by the end of it and say, here, let's put some perspective on this. And generally, you're not doing as bad as you think. Here's where you can focus, and let's set some goals with you and give you some assignments from there.
I'll add that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to add that. Yeah, so most people, when they get feedback, we're always worried. We're hyper focused on any low scores that we see, and so we kind of get, we go through that, that process, that emotional process of kind of understanding what it said. And like you said, Skylar, giving them perspective, And I think the focus we have is really on making it a positive experience. We want them to walk away kind of feeling uplifted, like they got some good information, some good direction. And, most of our coaches here are doing like 100 of these a year. And so we're having multiple conversations with people. We can quickly point out what we're observing and seeing and what their opportunities might be, but we want to guide them to that point and not necessarily tell them what to do. So it's really a collaborative kind of session. And we're also trying to tie it to what they're trying to accomplish this year and make it very relevant for their success. So there's a lot of nuance there as well, but again, we really want people to have a positive outcome from this and feel, kind of motivated to change. That's kind of what we do. We disrupt them with the 360, and hopefully it motivates them to improve.
Yeah, no, I'd second that. I mean, I'm regularly in those coaching sessions, I'm using the term, you're making mountains out of molehills, because we as humans are just naturally gravitate to our weaknesses and want to just focus on how we're not doing well. And we are constantly as coaches saying, how, let's not necessarily fret too much about that. Actually, you're doing pretty well on that. And to Charles's point, we really want people to have a positive experience and understand their results and know and get them to a place where they're powerful and can move to, making action plans and setting some goals there. So that's our individual debrief. Again, ideal, but also not necessarily scalable, not necessarily available to the masses. If you're going to be running hundreds of these assessments in your organization, one-on-one is the ideal. But we then offer group debriefs for being a little bit more practical, where we can, tailor it to groups of up to 30 participants. We generally see between 10 and 15 participants seems to be the sweet spot of doing a group debrief. So you can go deep with them and allow them to ask some questions. And throughout the group debrief, we'll show here's how to, here's a sample report, here's how to read it. But a lot of that also we talk about, here's how to create focus areas. Here's really the things you should pay attention to. And we'll help them prioritize and say, these areas are the ones you should focus on more. And weaknesses is actually that bottom of the list of things that they should focus on. But we want to build those priorities, and we'll talk about that in those group debriefs. We do have on-sites as an option for that, which can be powerful, where it allows people to come up after and ask us some individualized questions, which isn't always available when we're doing an online presentation. But we definitely do the majority of these online with our clients. And so those group debriefs can be a really good step. And a lot of organizations will even utilize a group debrief and then offer individual debriefs as optional add-on for people who need some more in-depth coaching too. So those are the kind of the way to get to a lot of people. The third thing we offer is the coaching certification. This is if you're going to do lots of 360s and you're trying to scale the process. We train your HR team. If you've already got executive coaches you use, we can certify your executive coaches to do 360 debriefs and know how to read the report, but also how to encourage people to take next steps based off of the feedback. I mean, these reports are 20, 30 pages long. They're not super hard to interpret, but they're not easy either. They're not like something that everybody's going to understand and how to go through right away. So we do offer this certification course. Details, some of the benefits of it, it's 2 virtual 3-hour group sessions. So we usually do like a Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Friday. We'll do some sessions, or it might be when we usually do one certification course per month. If you have a lot of people at your organization that want to be certified, 8, 10 plus people, we can actually set this up for your organization specifically too, so you don't have to work on our time frame of monthly. Some major benefits is we get some SHRM credit or HRCI credits. 6 credit hours is how much you get. And then by the end of it, you should be able to do individual debriefs as well. So with a lot of our clients that are really large, that do 360s very regularly, we'll kind of actually do a little bit of all 3. They'll do the majority of coaching internally. And then if they've got executives or other HR team members that it feels awkward for internal HR people to debrief, they'll say, well, why don't you do our individual debriefs and HR team? And then we also will incorporate some group debriefs as well to as we scale this. But yeah.
Couple questions here. Someone mentioned imposter syndrome, and that's what a lot of people feel like when they're looking at the results and seeing all this positive feedback. And so you're trying to, push people to see these high scores on their report, and sometimes they don't believe them. They think people are just being nice. And we really want people to kind of internalize that, no, people appreciate your contribution here. And it's part of that positive outcome. The other question is a good one. How do you handle debriefing managers of the person receiving a 360? Generally, we'd say, we want the manager to go through the 360 first so they understand the process and what's expected. And usually what we expect managers to do is just work with their direct reports to develop and finalize their action plan as a result. And so again, it's helpful if they're familiar with the report and what it looks like, but they don't even necessarily need to see their direct reports results to facilitate a good conversation about their development. So you could, as the HR person, you could have the one-on-one, go through the report in detail, and maybe the manager is just providing some support follow-up thereafter.
Yeah. Well, and by organization, a lot of times sometimes just hopping on a call with one of our consultants and saying, here's what we're trying to accomplish with our 360s. We can even just say, oh, well, then you should probably debrief the manager ahead of time or let them. And it really just depends on what you're trying to achieve there too. But we're definitely helpful to kind of navigate. And we've seen lots of different companies do different things. And we've got some insights there. Good questions. Okay, I want to take a moment and talk a little bit about our beyond just the 360 debrief, some of our longer term coaching we offer. And the 360 is foundational part of these coaching sessions. And really, we've got our developmental accelerator coaching sessions, or we call it 100-day coaching, you might hear us say, and then transformational coaching, which is 6-month coaching. The developmental one is really, like I said, the 360 is the foundation. And the first session of the 7 sessions we offer with that is debriefing that 360 assessment. And then there's really 6 follow-up sessions that we do there. And the nice thing about this is it's a lot of times when I do an individual debrief, I feel like I'm like encouraging people. And then I almost get the feeling I assume my wife has when she sends our children off to the first day of school, where I'm like hoping they do well out in
Good
the
luck.
world, and I'm sending them off. And when it comes to 100-day coaching, it's nice where we can have some touch points and I can check in and say, how are you doing? I can be a little bit more of that helicopter mom or helicopter parent. But it really, through the accountability, we see a lot of progress, and we've seen some great results. I'm working with some people 100-day coaching right now, and they're just swearing by how helpful this has been, because it's really motivated them to make the changes they need to, where we regularly as leaders, as individuals, we put ourselves last, and having some of this 100-day coaching adds some of the accountability where it pushes people to do more. Sometimes with the 100-day coaching, we'll provide some additional assessments, emotional intelligence, conflict style, really trying to build out what that leader looks like. When it comes to our transformational coaching, we always include more than just a 360. We want to build out a leadership profile for the leaders we're coaching there. And you can see this is kind of like the 100-day coaching on steroids. It's a little bit more beefy. We've got twice as many sessions, and we're going to get a lot more involved and really drive results. What would you add on these, Charles? I know you've done a lot more of these bigger coaching things than I have.
So I'll just say, like, the first one, 100 days, more targeted to maybe 1 or 2 things that we want to focus on that are important, whereas the transformational or 6-month item is more open-ended, and so it's more of a journey. We're really focusing on a lot of different things, holistic kind of approach. And so it allows a little bit more flexibility.
Sure. Okay, for time reason, I want to make sure we just get to a couple more slides that are left. We're really pretty much at the end here, but I want to talk about why a debrief of some sort, whether you use our best practices, but just somehow walking through results with participants is invaluable. And Charles might be able to speak more to this, but we did a follow-up survey. Actually, do you want to share some of this, Charles?
Yeah, so we're all about survey research here, and so we wanted to find out if the coaching that was provided to people was actually working. And so with one of our clients, they did a lot of debriefs internally with their HR leaders. So the HR leaders were providing a lot of these debriefs. We did a follow-up survey with these managers that went through this process to find out how effective it was. And so here are some of the questions that we asked there, and then we'll show you some of the key findings here. So 94% of those that received coaching and set goals thought that the process was effective. That wasn't very surprising at all. But conversely, only 34% who did not receive sufficient coaching, we'll say didn't have a coaching session, they just were handed the report, only 34% of them felt it was effective. So that debrief really makes a big difference in people's perception of the process itself. And we'd say, don't do a 360 unless you're going to provide some type of debrief for people, because it could backfire. People could get hung up on some low scores and feel bad about it. So that's why this, either you or us or anyone does some kind of debrief on the results.
Yeah. In fact, I wanted to just share one thing. I mean, as we've looked at how valuable having some sort of coaching as part of the process is. This is our 360 platform where you can see these are the major steps of a 360 process. And our tech team has designed a beautiful software that takes people easily through this whole process and automatically moves them from stage to stage. However, unless they have a coaching session set up as part of their process, we will not manually or automatically send out reports to participants, because we've seen how invaluable having that debrief is. And so it's just kind of something I wanted to share. It's something people ask regularly, like, well, when are the reports being sent out? And it's like, well, unless you have a coaching session of some sort, they will not be sent out. You can manually send them out, which isn't super difficult, but it's the principle of the matter that we really know that coaching is super important, that getting a report can be detrimental at times. So with that, I mean, those are main services that we have and that we provide. Really, those design, participant preparation, and then the coaching afterwards as well. So that's what Charles and I have to share. I guess I want to just take one more moment and tell you to come back on Tuesday, April 11th. We're going to have another webinar where McKay, our illustrious McKay Kelly, he's one of our favorite project managers. He's going to hate me for overselling this, but he's going to talk about setting up rater groups and selection, some of the fundamentals of how you actually set those things up in the platform and to take actions. We can hang around for a bit and take questions and respond to questions, but otherwise we really appreciate you showing up and participating in the webinar today.